Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast, a very, very special live edition. I am Tom Orr. Tony Gerderman not here today, but Kevin Noon is. Kevin, how's it going?
Oh, it's going great. Thanks. Glad to be here. Obviously cannot fill up the ketchup-filled shoes of one Tony Gerdeman, but we will do our best here on the show. A big Thursday kickoff to March Madness for real, but we're maybe not our main topic. You guys out there in TV land get to pick what we talk about. So looking forward to seeing the questions as they come in. And Tom's asking me if I froze up. He looks like he froze up to me. So we're already off to a roaring start when it comes to technology here. Jordan Kapler already giving me grief here. So can you see me or can you see Tom? If you're able to hear and see what I'm doing right now, let me know who are you seeing? Are you seeing Tom talking? Are you seeing me talking? What is going on? We just lost Tom. So, in my opinion, now the show is much better, Jordan. We'll welcome Tom back in from the land of bad internet when he gets here. All right, we're getting there. So, yeah, everybody was able to see me. This was a Tom problem, not a Kevin problem. So let's make sure we got that straight. After paying a lot of money for these stupid Orbi routers, I better have pristine internet or I'm gonna cut a blankety blank. Welcome back, Tom.
I'm going to assume, Kevin, that this was a literally everyone else in the world problem and mine was fine. So I don't know what was wrong with literally everyone else in the world, but it seemed fine on my end until it didn't. Kevin, also, was that the ultimate power pause?
It really was. Well, I looked and you just had this smile on your face for a real long time. I'm like, well, we know that's not real. We know that's not real. After watching World Baseball Classic last night, I'm sure. I'm sorry to go there, but yeah.
So for those who don't know, the Mets closer last night, Edwin Diaz, closed out a game for Puerto Rico, eliminated the Dominican Republic, I believe, in a really dramatic World Baseball Classic game. Why do I not know a lot of the specifics? Because who cares? It's the World Baseball Classic. Except then in the celebration after the game, he injured his knee. It looked like, based on the reactions of the people on the field, he injured his knee very severely. I'm just going to go ahead and assume he's out for the season in just the extremely stupid baseball version of the Bill Gramatica. Do you remember when Bill Gramatica, the kicker for the Cardinals, blew out his knee celebrating a made field goal like in the middle of a game? I don't think it was a game winner even. Kevin, why? Like I'm getting these like consoling texts from people. Like I had a guy I coached softball with who was a Braves fan texted me this morning like, "Hey buddy, how you doing?" It's like, "Oh man, it is bleak. It is bleak." Kevin, I think my lesson here, and this is not a new lesson that I've learned just now, but I don't think the Mets can have nice things.
No, they can't. But don't worry, they got an owner with deep pockets who'll go out and buy more nice things and wash, rinse, repeat. The Dodgers have this happen quite often. Somebody gets hurt in spring training, down for the year. I mean, Dustin May had finally got to pitch a little bit at the end of last year, but I mean, his 10 to 12 month injury really was more like 18 months. And the Dodgers had a nice run where they everybody that they would draft with their first round draft pick would have Tommy John surgery, and then their arm would essentially fall off. So I feel you. Competitively, taking the Mets down a little bit certainly helps the Dodgers and everybody else in the NL, but I don't even know if I'd sit there and say that the Dodgers are co-favorites just based on what everybody else did during the offseason, is in the process of doing. The Dodgers needed to get under the luxury tax cap hit, so they didn't really do much in terms of the offseason. I mean, obviously, they lost Gavin Lux for the year already, like opening days of spring training. I think he was getting off the bus and tripped and like broke a leg. I mean, it wasn't that he was played like second base, and he's gone for the year. So after all of the mean memes I sent you, my heart does go out to you and Mets Nation. I know as well as anybody what that's like.
Yeah, it is. It's not great, but you are not here to hear us complain about our baseball teams. You are here to hear us talk about Ohio State sports and maybe specifically Ohio State football. Odysseus 2002 says, "Welcome to the club, Tom. I'm in sports hell as a Chicago sports fan. You had the '90s, and if you are a North Sider, you won a World Series in the last decade or so." Um, Jordan Kapler wants to know if we can talk about how we would do in 4 Olympic sports of our choosing. If you have not listened yet to the show we released yesterday, Kevin and I talked about, we answered some listener questions on the Buckeye Weekly episode we did. And it was, or was that might have been the Buckeyes tomorrow morning. We did 2 shows yesterday, Kevin and I. On one of them, you'll just have to listen to both. But on one of them, we talked about how, could you throw for 10 yards in an NFL game? Could you score a basket in an NBA game? Let's see, Olympic sports, swimming. I mean, like, I can swim. I could swim 200 meters or whatever. I would not do it very fast. Could I swim the length? Kevin, do you think you could swim the length of the pool once in the time it takes an Olympic swimmer to swim it, let's say 4 times? Could you do 50 meters in the time that it takes an Olympian to do 200?
I'm not a strong swimmer.
Not a strong swimmer. Okay.
I'd have to have like the floaties and the little kickboard, and then yeah, absolutely, I could do that. Long story that I'm sure I've told on a podcast at some point. In my young teens, I was out in the Pacific Ocean and got hit by an undercurrent and was under for quite some time. And ever since then, not really comfortable with the water unless it's a hot tub and I have a drink in my hand. So, you know what? If you dropped me in the middle of the pool and said, swim or die, I could probably swim and save my life. But I don't know if that is the right motivation for winning an Olympic sport.
Got it. More survival than recreation from your end. Okay, so let's see what other Olympic sports. Like, I think we've all seen the the people try and run the 40 at the combine. Just the average people try and run the 40 at the combine. So I feel like track is probably out. High jump, like, no, that's probably no.
No. I ran hurdles in junior high school. I don't necessarily, I mean, my knees are too bad for that. Let's not forget we could throw Winter Olympics in here too.
Ooh, Winter Olympics. I mean, yeah, I like, if you put me in the back of a bobsled, I could, I can run and push and, maybe stay upright depending on how good the spikes and the shoes are. If I don't have to be the driver and I'm just in the back, the third guy in a 4-man bobsled, I mean, you're going to notice a significant performance decrease, I'm sure, but I might be able to make it down the hill in one piece. You know what?
You could put me on the Olympic baseball team. I know it's still kind of like an exhibition sport, but you put me on a team where I'm diluted from, it's not an individual sport, it's a team sport, kind of like you're talking about on bobsled. I mean, yeah, I'm not going to do well against the Cubans or the Dominicans or anything like that, but I'll beat the hell out of the Latvians. Sorry to any of our Latvian viewers out there, but yeah, I think that you really start trying to cook the books a little bit there. I mean, it's not saying how do you think you would do. I mean, yeah, I could get out there and be, you could put me like in some sort of like rifle event. I'm not a great shot. I'm not a terrible shot, but you could put me out there. I'm probably not going to finish last. I mean, I'm sure that there's like a one
would absolutely finish last.
I don't know. I don't know. I've heard so many stories about these little nation states that sit there and send their one representative to go out into one sport, and that when you're dealing with like a small village that is a nation state that has Olympic representation. I mean, I'm not even sitting there saying it's as bad as maybe like the Jamaican bobsled team. I mean, with the original Cool Runnings iteration of it, but to that level. I mean, we always hear the story about, oh, okay, they don't have snow in this country, but check out their downhill skier. All right, that guy or gal is going to whip me up because I don't know how to ski either. I'm really kind of a shut-in, but I think that if you gave me, I would have a fighting chance not to finish last in some sort of gunplay.
Is agoraphobia a Winter Olympic sport? I feel like it's not. So you might medal in that one maybe, but yeah, I don't think so. I just watched a slow motion video of someone pole vaulting and doing some insane pole vault, and it was, it wasn't just the regular speed. It was like a slow motion where you could really see how this thing works. And the physics of that, like, no, thank you. No, I don't even want to try. Yeah. Odysseus says pole vault. No, thank you. I do not want to even try that. You're upside down 15 feet above the ground with a pole trying to whip you over a ball. No, thank you. Respectfully decline. You can keep the medal. Thank you. I will stay here.
A fraternity brother of mine was a pole vaulter at Ohio State during a time where I think they only had 2. So he was like a walk-on pole vaulter and automatically got to go to Big Tens because, Ohio State only had 2 at the time. And he would be like, we'd be talking and he's like, yeah, I don't know why I enjoy it, but he was crazy. He seriously was the type of guy they said, go drink some beers and go run through that wall. He would do it. He just crazy. And actually, now that I come to think about it, he wasn't much of a drinker. He was crazy sober. He was pole vaulting Tim May. He was pole vaulting Tim May.
Drink this Fresca and then go run through that wall with a big pole. Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. That is a very specific kind of college friend. Yeah. As for the rest of that, yeah, if they had roller skating, Sage Ohio says he would win gold. Yeah, I think yeah. Another no vote for pole vaulting. That just like high jump. Okay, sure. Triple jump, long jump, sure, okay, that's fine. Like I'm just
Javelin.
jumping and I'm just landing, or I'm jumping and I'm landing on my back on a big poofy mat. Like you're not gonna accidentally fall backwards if you're high jumping. Pole vaulting.
How about rhythmic gymnastics? Tom out there with a ribbon or a hoop or a ball or whatever.
Well, I am a little more adjacent to that than you might think because I have a daughter who is a competitive figure skater, and they have all of those events as figure skating events as well. She has not done them, but her friends have. And as someone who shoots pictures of figure skating, when she is at a competition, you get very pretty pictures of these like nice rainbowy ribbons swirling around in these nice patterns and all that kind of stuff. I am not what you would call graceful. Generally speaking. So that's probably not, I am more of a, brute strength kind of sport person, much more than a
weightlifting.
Yes. Yeah. Maybe Olympic weightlifting again, like ow, my spine. But yeah, I think that's maybe more my path to Olympic glory. The only actual answer, the only sport that I could even conceivably, if I like just shut down everything else in my life and dedicated myself 24/7 to this for the next 3 years before there's another Winter Olympics, I could at least compete in curling if I really wanted to. Like that's like hand-eye coordination. And, there's obviously a ton of skill that goes into it. And if I tried to do it right now, I would absolutely fall on my butt. The media party at the Peach Bowl this year, they had like dry land curling, and I really wanted to do it. And then there was the line was just endless. So I never got a chance to do it because I really wanted to try it. I follow the Columbus Curling Club on Twitter just because I'm just like curling curious enough that, maybe at some point I'll talk to folks at our ice rink into painting some curling stuff under the ice one year. But yeah, I've never tried it, but that's one of those things where you look at the people who are competing in that. Like you look at the people who are running track, or the people who are, cross country skiers or something like that. And it's like, okay, sorry, you're just mutants. That's not what a person looks like. You look at the curlers and it's like, oh yeah, those are people that you could see like sitting at the bar down the street on a Friday night in a lot of cases. Yeah, it's a bunch of white dudes from Minnesota in their 40s. Like I'm a white dude in my 40s. I could maybe do that. And I don't, this does not require you to look like you could run an ultra marathon or anything like that. So I think that's the only plausible path to the Olympics for me right now. But I would need to start training like right about now. So I'm not, that Olympic dream may die soon as well.
I was going to say, don't let your wife find out or she'll have you sweeping all the time around the house. I think it's just really cool. The person that pushes the stone or whatever and how they follow it. I know that I would probably break my neck, first of all, trying to get down into that squatted position. And then my knees would blow out at that point, and I would just be sliding down the ice prone with my arms flailing. My knees, my knees.
But then you get to tell the story. I would have made the Olympics back in 2028 if only I hadn't blown out my knees. It was, man, I was so close to making the Olympic curling team, but blew out my knee. Tragic. Glasswing Butterfly says curling is too much like cleaning my house. Yeah, it's a little, good practice for like Swiffers. That's just for those. If you, Kevin, I don't know if you were at the media in the media lounge this year when I annihilated Tony in that shuffle puck game. I feel like that's adjacent enough to the skills you'd need for curling that, sort of the hand-eye coordination. I feel like that might be adjacent enough that is at least still a little bit of a possibility.
What, the one that was somewhere between like Labyrinth and Shuffleboard or whatever at the media party?
Yes, yeah, it's like the long shuffle puck
Yeah.
table that you've probably seen in bars.
Well, I mean, it's not really widely spread yet. Like that was kind of like an early adopter place, and there were a lot of us that really enjoyed the game. So I'm like, just for fun, let's see how much a board is. Like $5,000. I'm like, I don't like the game that much, but yeah. Tony was, God bless Tony. He wasn't very good at that game. But then again, what was, I don't even remember how the scoring worked. Like, was it like 5 for like the smallest hole in the middle or whatever? That was about my highlight in that game. Was I was able to get a 5 there. But everybody, a little bit of a production note. We were going into this show. It's like, what the heck are we going to talk about for the first 5 minutes as we're waiting for questions to come in? Be sure to get your questions in. Oh, we'll talk about this. We'll talk about that. We've talked about being Olympic athletes, which is laughable at best. And God, now I need to figure out what the name of that game was, because I was all about it. And we only had like 2 hours to play it during the whole trip.
Yeah, and you were talking about a different one than I was. I was talking about the one in the media room where it's a long board and you have a little puck and you slide it.
Oh, yeah, that one's at every bar. Yeah,
that one's pretty common. that one's pretty common. The other one is it was like you were rolling like a big ball bearing almost, and there were holes in the table on the other side, and you had to get it was like 1, 3, and 5 points or something like that. So
yeah, that was my jam. That other game, all I do when I get drunk is I just sit there and just, it's like going to a pool table that's obviously not a coin op one, because you don't want to waste it, and just sitting there and throwing the balls across and seeing which pockets you can get them into. That's just, the bar shuffleboard is not really my jam.
Yeah, so that was the Peach Bowl trip. Just us playing shuffle puck and rolling ball bearings. That was the entirety of our week there. Hey, let's talk a little Ohio State football, shall we? From Colin Singleton, do you guys think the loser of the QB battle, he's projecting that as Devin Brown, will transfer? I don't, Kevin. I think there is a clear enough path to the playing field. This, let's use this as our setup here. That as Colin suggests, it's going to be Kyle McCord as a starter. So if it's Devin Brown, you sort of, based on the history of Ohio State, you would sort of project the starting Ohio State quarterback, who is a former 5-star. If you go through the history, that guy plays 3 years and then gets off to the NFL and gets picked in the first round. That happened with Dwayne Haskins, was a third-year sophomore, right? Justin Fields was a third year. CJ Stroud was a third year. Guess what? This is Kyle McCord's third year coming up. So if Kyle McCord is a starter, it's not a guarantee that he ends up in the NFL draft in 2024. But I think there's a decent possibility he does. So then if you're Devin Brown, you're the backup this year. And then you presume, you're the front runner to win the starting job, assuming it's open. You win the starting job in 2024. And guess what? Then you're the third gear guy who is off to the NFL. Now, the NFL has sort of shown an inclination to want guys who have, more reps is better, essentially. But if you were an NFL, if you're an Ohio State quarterback, it seems like those guys are, Dwayne Haskins ended up in the NFL as a first-round draft pick after starting one season. So I don't think that that's necessarily a guarantee that he transfers out. Do you? I think there's a decent argument to be made that he would stick around in that situation.
Well, and we're playing in the sandbox of saying that Kyle McCord wins the job, and I've already kind of come out and said that I think it might be Devin Brown. This is the thing I'll say if it is Kyle McCord, and I think that Ohio State really can't make a wrong decision between these two guys. We know that 1-year starters in college do not translate well to the league. So is it a case that Kyle McCord immediately jumps after a year? Because do they sit there and see the numbers? I mean, I'm sure they're going to be representatives and things getting in his ear and saying, "Oh, now's the time to go. You're eligible. You're going to make so much more money in the league than you are, through NIL or anything else like that." But if McCord stays 2 years, then Brown is up against a brick wall. But I think Brown would stick around for a year just to kind of see where things go regardless, because at that point you're getting another year in the system, another year learning under Ryan Day and Corey Dennis, and getting yourself into the best position if you do need to transfer. So I don't see a scenario of where Devin Brown would transfer this spring, this summer, this fall, because you don't know what Kyle McCord's decision would be. Now, if we flipped it around and say Devin Brown wins the job, does Kyle McCord move? That one I'm less certain about what that outcome would be, because of the fact that Kyle McCord is a year further along with his clock and everything else, and needs to find a place. And there's such a premium on finding competent starting quarterbacks. And truth be told, without really having a list of starters in the Big Ten, I'm still going to sit there and say that Kyle McCord is better than the vast majority of starting quarterbacks that opposing teams are going to throw up there. And this is a Kyle McCord in a world of where he does not beat out Devin Brown. But to the root of Colin's question, I do not see Devin Brown transferring this year, this spring, or whatever, if we in fact do get an answer coming out of spring ball as to who the starting quarterback is.
Yeah, and assuming this is a relatively close competition, and I think it's going to be, you also got to remember, whoever wins that starting job, Ohio State has needed to use multiple quarterbacks in a whole bunch of seasons. It's not every year. They have had seasons where, CJ Stroud was healthy and made it through all of last season, and made it through pretty much all of 2021, except for the one game where, guess what, Kyle McCord had to start against Akron. So you have seen seasons where, rather famously, they got down to their third string quarterback in 2014. So even if you're the backup, you are the next man up. And if you've been in the system for a year and you've been practicing and you're getting a bunch of first team reps this spring and maybe even this summer and into fall camp, well, you're going to be reasonably well prepared. And you also are going to have some pretty good weapons around you, where if you get a chance to play this fall, whether through, just backup coming in with the score, in whatever it is against Rutgers in the second half, or you end up getting thrust into the starting role because of injury, you're going to have some pretty good weapons. You're going to be pretty well set up for success in that case. And then you have seen, the guy who gets thrown in, the Dwayne Haskins gets thrown in against Michigan and then saves the day there, and then ends up winning the starting job the following year, and then ends up in an NFL draft first rounder the year after that. So, I think there's a pretty compelling case to be made, especially if it's Devin Brown to stick around. If Devin Brown free and clear wins the job this spring, I could, then at that point, like Kevin said, I think there could be an argument for Kyle McCord to transfer, because if the younger guy has beaten you out, he's going to be the starter for the next 2 years, more than likely, unless you can then beat him out, which I don't know that they want to have an ongoing quarterback battle. So I don't expect anyone to come like free and clear, absolutely definitively win the job this spring. I still think this probably drags on into the fall, but we'll see. I think, especially if it's Kyle McCord who wins the job, I would expect Devin Brown to stick around and potentially try and be the starter in 2024 instead. So Antoine Johnson says, I kind of missed that you weren't online, even you're Buckeyes. What do you think about Michigan actually pressuring Ohio State with recruiting Marshall? That is Jordan Marshall, the running back out of the Cincinnati area. Y'all might lose this battle. And that is, our recruiting guys have said, that is one that is going to be a real head-to-head Ohio State-Michigan battle, and is absolutely one that the Michigan could end up winning. Well, Michigan has obviously brought in some pretty talented running backs over the years. That has turned into a position at Michigan where they've had pretty good talent the last few years. And, having beaten Ohio State now 2 years in a row, it feels, Kevin, like for the first time in a long time, Michigan has the possibility of coming into Ohio and getting taking a player who Ohio State is really recruiting hard, top of the board type player for Ohio State, because they've done it recently with, hey, they're trying to offer a bunch of these offensive linemen, and there's like 10 D1, FBS caliber offensive linemen in the state of Ohio this year, and Ohio State can't take them all. And they're offering a bunch of guys who Ohio State hasn't offered. And so you're going to get some guys out of Ohio that way. This one potentially feels different, though.
Wake me when Michigan gets a kid that Ohio State highly covets out of Ohio. And I say that a little tongue in cheek because Antoine Johnson and I have had some great conversations over on the Big Meat Kickoff. And, he's asked a lot of questions there. And, I like his questions, so I answer them. So we've always had a good back and forth. I do think that Michigan certainly has an opportunity there, but we go back through recent years, and there's just not a ton of guys that Michigan has really even been able to get involved with that Ohio State has wanted out of the state of Ohio. And with Jordan Marshall, at Moeller, Mark Elder steps down. So let's see where Jordan Marshall ends up. It sounds like, he could maybe be at a different school. We'll see kind of what goes on there, but I had said before the 2 years of Michigan winning the game happening is look at what happened during Lloyd Carr. And in those years, Michigan came into the state of Ohio and recruited very well. And then Jim Tressel put the fence up, and then the state kind of dried up. So it wasn't necessarily a case of Urban Meyer getting burned with his strategy of maybe taking 5 or 6 guys from Ohio and doing the rest of it nationally. Ohio's going to be strong in 24. It's going to be stronger in 25. And there's going to be a lot of guys there, and the getting's going to be good. And Ohio State's not going to be able to take everybody. But Jordan Marshall, somebody Ohio State definitely wants. Ohio State needs a 2-man class in 24, not taking a scholarship back this year in 23. The kind of the dream scenario is for Ohio State to get Jordan Marshall and get Sam Williams-Dixon as their 1-2 punch at running back. And I feel supremely confident about Ohio State's chances of getting Williams-Dixon. Marshall, maybe not as much of a slam dunk there, but there's going to be more opportunity at Ohio State, I think, just based on the fact of you look that they didn't bring in a scholarship back this year. Mayan is going to be in his last year. Trevion's in his last year. You're going to be getting guys that are going to be getting toward, their NFL draft eligibility. I mean, we haven't really had a chance to see much out of Evan Pryor yet because of his injury. I mean, we saw a true freshman year of where he got on the field, got blown up a little bit, then he loses year 2. But this will be the end of year 3 for him. Dallin Hayden will have 2 years under his belt at that point. It'll be interesting, but I think that the Ohio State Michigan recruiting battles are always fun to cover. It's all, from our standpoint, it's great because it's an instant story right there over and above so tell us what schools are talking to you. What do you think about these schools? Who did you grow up rooting for? I mean, you could go through the formula of just the 100 level recruiting article, but when it's like, as an Ohio kid, how do you view being recruited and being heavily involved by Ohio State and Michigan, 2 bitter rivals that want nothing more than to obliterate their opponent?
And, it's interesting, the history of Michigan coming into Ohio to pull kids out. They have done it in the past, but it's been a long time since they've been consistently pulling significant players that Ohio State would be chasing out of Ohio. Desmond Howard and Elvis Gerbach coming out of Cleveland, Charles Woodson coming out of Fostoria. A lot of the times, even the guys that Michigan gets who end up being really good players, Jake Butt, Taco Charlton, those are guys who Ohio State was not pursuing, even though they were Central Ohio guys. So, they have pulled good players out, but generally, you will have the family who is, the Michigan family, the Borens, for example, where the dad played for Michigan, and then so the oldest son goes to play for Michigan, And, and then that sort of flipped when he transferred back to Ohio State. And now they are, if you have seen the Boren brothers trucks driving around Columbus, where they stand on the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry. So that's kind of, Brady Hoke, when Brady Hoke was at Michigan, end of Tressel, especially the Fickle year, there was the, oh boy, Brady Hoke is, ties to Ohio, and he's going to really be rating the state. And they got some guy, they got DeMonte Thomas, and they got guys like that out, but they didn't, they were never pulling the top guys out of the state of Ohio. And, maybe that will start happening now to some degree. It's possible. But I think the other thing that I see Antoine in the comments talking about the fact that some Michigan guys might be, feeling like Ohio State sort of slow playing them and focusing more nationally, and that Michigan is making these guys more of a priority, and that might, make them view Michigan as maybe more of a choice moving forward. I think you have to remember with NIL and how that's sort of changing things in the recruiting world. I think Ohio State, one of the lessons they came away from after last recruiting cycle was you are not going to be able to go down south and just get whoever you want, because there are going to be guys for whom it is not just a development decision anymore. And, there's always been kind of money under the table, especially in certain sections of the country, driving some of these decisions. But now it's more money above the table, and you're not going to turn everything into a bidding war, because number one, you don't necessarily have the money to turn everything into a bidding war. But number two, it's also, do you want to turn everything into a bidding war? Because you look at some of the schools where it has been, dollar bills, y'all, as the recruiting strategy, and it has not necessarily gone great. You're still looking at schools like Georgia and Alabama and places like that down south where they're recruiting because there is NIL obviously, but also they can sell development. Tennessee can't really sell development because you're looking at the history of Tennessee football and how many first rounders is Tennessee cranking out versus Alabama and Georgia. We're not talking about the same number. Ohio State can sort of sell development as well. And so you're going to have, I think, a lot of kids who are going to choose Ohio State just because you can look at the numbers. You can, Brian Hartline can just kind of point and just go, hey, you remember the year that 3 of my former players got picked back to back in the first year or the first round of the draft? That kind of sells itself to a certain degree. So, but in terms of the national stuff, you're going to be probably doing a little bit less national recruiting and a little more early focus in Ohio. So I don't know that Michigan can necessarily rely on but we offered you first thing long term, because I think Ohio State's strategy is maybe shifting a little closer to home now as well. So that may not necessarily be a viable strategy, next year, the year after that, if trends kind of continue the way they are.
Well, and I've said this for years, and it still holds true. Things are changing a little bit, but you have to be very careful when you are the home state school of these kids in your offer strategy. And what that means is if you're Ohio State, you have to be damn sure you're ready to take the commitment of the kid at the moment you offer him, whether or not he is signing in 6 months or he's signing in 60 months. You have to be ready. We've seen the cautionary tales. We saw the Danny Clark situation. To a lesser extent, we saw the Todd Sibley Jr. situation. You offer a couple years out. Okay, coach, I'm in. I call your bluff. I'm in. And things don't necessarily work out. And then it just turns into an ugly situation. There are a lot of bad feelings and everything else. Ohio State has like 5 reported offers within the state of Ohio in the class of 25, 2 offers already in the class of 26. So things are speeding up a little bit, but we talk about the class of 26. One of those offers is to Chris Henry Jr. I mean, that kid is just a can't miss type of kid, in my opinion. You offer them when you can, and you just ride there. And I like Ohio State's chances of landing Chris Henry Jr., to be quite honest, but stay tuned. That's a long ways away. Don't know if I'll be covering recruiting in 26 or if I'll be selling widgets. You never know what's going to happen at that point. But Ohio State does have to really, with Ohio being as strong as it is in 24 and 25, and it's a little too early to tell what 26 is going to look like. Those kids are still quite young in their football development. you're able to pay a little bit more attention to home. You sit there and let's look at here in 24. There are 10 offensive linemen at least that are Power 5 offensive linemen, in my opinion. Ohio State already has one with Mark Nave Jr. out of Toledo. I think Ohio State lands the Armstrong twins. So that's going to be 3, but they might need to take 6. But I think the next 3 that they look at are going to be out-of-state guys. But if you sit there and say, okay, you're getting Nave Jr., Armstrong, and Armstrong, that's a pretty good class. But of course, people are going to go and look historically at what things look like in 4 years. It's like, well, you screwed that one up. You missed out on this kid or that kid. And how did you blow that? I mean, and that's one of the issues here. And it's even a little more unique than what's going on in the state of Michigan, because there you obviously have Michigan and Michigan State, or Michigan and Michigan Light, or however you want to put it. And there's not really, I mean, sorry Cincinnati, there's not really a second huge option in Ohio. Cincinnati is going to the Big 12. Cincinnati is now going to be Power 5, but it's not really the same, in my opinion. And maybe that's my bias talking. I don't know. You guys let me know there in the chat. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. I think that Michigan needs to have a little bit more of an Ohio recruiting strategy than it's had in years past. I mean, they certainly have had some success with guys like Rod Moore and things there. Guys at Ohio State has not necessarily gone full bore after, but I can assure you that Ohio State is paying particular attention to the state, just as for what Tom mentioned. It's a lot easier to hang on to an Ohio kid than somebody in another region, and then when the real recruiting starts.
Yeah, and I think Ohio State's strategy is starting to get a little closer to Ohio now. Michigan's strategy feels like it's getting a little closer to Ohio as well. Michigan they haven't abandoned the state of Ohio recently, but they haven't focused on it in the last, maybe since the Brady Hoke era. They haven't necessarily focused on Ohio the way they have at a lot of points in the past. And, some of that might be that the second level talent in Ohio has not been quite as good over the last decade or so than it has in the past. But, Michigan would just rather famously just go out to Massachusetts and Connecticut and Rhode Island. And yeah, you get Kwity Paye out of Rhode Island, and that's a pretty big win. But there's also, those are just not big high school football states. And a lot of that, I think, was, Don Brown's ties to the area, and he would have people he would bring in from there. And that sometimes works, but there were a lot of times that didn't work. And you want to get people from high level competitive football states. Ohio is one of those. Texas, Georgia, Florida, California. I mean, you know where they play high school football, and you do not necessarily think of Rhode Island as a premier high school football state. That's one of those places where it's like every 3 years there will be a 3-star kid that comes out of Rhode Island, or Connecticut's a little better than that, Massachusetts a little better than that, but those are not football juggernaut kind of areas. So, even New Jersey would be a much bigger football state than a lot of the New England states. So, yeah, Michigan has sort of changed its recruiting strategy in a way that I think is very logical. They changed the recruiting director last year, I think. Matty Dudek is gone. And I think just the overall recruiting strategy, it just makes a lot more sense for Michigan to be shopping a little closer to home. And even if you don't get, you don't beat Ohio State for the head-to-head kids very often, if you win one of those every once in a while, but then you get that, the next tier of kids out of Ohio, you can convince them to come to Michigan. That's something that Mark D'Antonio won a lot of football games, convincing that second tier of Ohio kids to come play for Michigan State. Mark Stoops down in Kentucky has won a lot of football games with Vince Marrow, convincing that second tier of Ohio players to come down and play in Kentucky. And, Kentucky can sell the SEC. Michigan can sell Michigan and the rivalry with Ohio State. And now they've won a couple Big Ten championships in a row and the college football playoff and all that. So it does. That just has, I don't think Michigan's going to come in and dominate the state of Ohio by any means. But if they can just pull some more talent out of the state every year, that's going to ultimately be, I think, a much smarter recruiting strategy than what they've been doing recently.
Oh, absolutely. I had to make sure my mic was on. I didn't hear myself in my headset. It will be very competitive, I think, down the stretch with these two schools if they start targeting the same kids. Um, I think it'll be interesting to see too, because Michigan has this bubble of the COVID year really created a bubble to where they kind of have a backlog of all of their talented kids right now. They've got by far like their best rosters that they've had in a lot of years, and it's easy to pick on the Brady Hoke years and the Rich Rod years and everything else, but let's be honest, the Jim Harbaugh tenure did not start off great, and they were not necessarily the most talented teams. But you sit there and you have the COVID year, which gives everybody an additional year of eligibility. You end up with this huge backlog of you have Blake Corum, and you have ahead of him. God dang it, what was Hassan Haskins? You had Hassan Haskins to Blake Corum to Donovan Edwards. I mean, you have a nice continuity plan there. You end up with the right situation at quarterback. I mean, to Michigan's credit, I think Michigan does a fantastic job of monitoring the portal. I mean, Michigan does a good job of plugging in what it needs, especially with the offensive line. You're looking at a team that wins the Joe Moore Award for the nation's top offensive line, and we know that the Ohio State-Michigan game is won in the trenches. So, I mean, I think they've done a very good job with that, and that's something that, Ohio State obviously went to the portal a little bit more this year than it has in years past. I think you go to the portal when you have misses. When you have a lot of misses out there, you need to go and get that immediate fill. And we may be talking here in a couple weeks about Ohio State going back to the portal if things do not shape up on the offensive line. If Josh Fryer on one side or Tager Shabola or who's getting the other look at right tackle? Zim Mahalski. If that doesn't work out, they might have to go and look to put somebody else in there. But when it comes to recruiting out of high school, buckle up, folks.
I do want to touch on that a little bit, because Michigan has done a really good job pulling guys out of the portal where, you go in and you look at Michigan's recruiting rankings the last few years. They've really not done particularly well in the recruiting rankings. I think they were 20th or thereabouts this year. But when you're pulling guys like Oluwatimi, for example, you pull him out of Virginia, throw him in as your starting center. Did he win the Remington, or he was a Remington finalist last year?
Finalist, at least.
Yeah,
I don't know
I think
if
they won
or not. He may have. I don't pay a ton of attention to that stuff.
They might have won the Joe Moore Award for the best offensive line as well. I mean, they certainly had one of the best offensive lines in the nation last year. That is a very smart use of the portal, where the offensive line is such a developmental position that, yeah, you get the guys now, but how are they going to develop over the next 2-3 years before they're actually ready to play? If you get someone who can start, and you bring him in because he started somewhere else, and you bring him in, and it's just kind of a plug and play thing, boy, that's a very, very smart use of the portal. They have supplemented what has been kind of an iffy recruiting level the last couple of years with the portal very well. And, I don't know when the recruiting gets back to, can they get to a top 5, top 10 level recruiting consistently again? The Jim Harbaugh NFL just sort of self-created, self-imposed drama every offseason, that's not going to help. That is not going to help you in recruiting if every single year you are out there sort of shopping around and throwing your name out there, and everyone every year kind of goes, well, is this guy going to be here or not? It's like the Larry Johnson will he or won't he retirement drama that gets thrown around and negative recruited against Ohio State. Guess what? Everyone can negative recruit against Jim Harbaugh because he keeps throwing his name out there for the NFL. You want to go play for Jim Harbaugh? How sure are you're going to be playing for Jim Harbaugh at any point, let alone 2-3 years from now? And you can't really be sure because he keeps throwing his name out there. And every year it's, oh, well, this is the last time. And then next offseason, he's back out there doing it again. So, and maybe it is just contract leverage, as people will say. But guess what? You're doing it. You are putting yourself out there.
People are going to tire of that. You play with fire. It is going to burn you eventually. And, that's not boisterous rivalry talk or anything. That's just a heavy dose of reality. It's going to bite you in the butt at some point. And I don't expect kids to come out and say, well, I was going to go to Michigan, but Jim Harbaugh's NFL flirtations, decided to stay south and I'm going to Miami or whatever, or honestly, we should go with where Michigan recruits. I'm going to UConn because of all of that. It's an unsustainable model if that keeps up. The cut that bleep out. If you're Michigan, you got to cut that bleep out.
Yeah, and I mean, eventually, it's going to resolve itself one of two ways. Where if people are sick of your crap, this is the there are memes about whoever you see, extremely handsome man, extremely pretty woman, like somewhere there is someone who is sick of their crap, basically.
That's the clean version of that one.
Yes. That's how we do it here on the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. We keep it clean. But yes, they you ultimately are going to get the no, you should go, by all means go. Jim Harbaugh is not the first coach to win a football game at the University of Michigan. He is not the first coach to win a Big Ten championship. It's the first coach in a while, but not, this has been done before. Michigan, I think, more rightly than in the past, views itself as one of the top teams in the nation, top programs in the nation, and probably views that this is not a Bill Snyder at Kansas State. No one can win here except for this one guy. This is a program that views itself as, well, this is Michigan. We should be able to win. And so eventually you will get people just sick of that. And if it is, whether that's 3 years or 4 years, it's, eventually the luster of that is going to wear off, because it's going to cause issues in recruiting every single year. We have people who I guess are getting caught up on the beginning of the show. Christina Hilt says rhythmic gymnastic is a lot harder than it looks. I am quite certain that it is a lot harder.
We're not crapping on it because we're saying that it's easy. I mean, it's not my favorite sport to watch or whatever, but I'm just saying though that, you sit there and you put me on the high dive and say jump. I mean, I'm probably going to, if I'm lucky, I'm going to hit my head on the board if I can even get myself turned around. But I'm going to drown, and that's going to be a situation. I don't think I'm going to decapitate myself with a hoop. I mean, I am pretty clumsy though, so who knows?
Yeah, I mean, the good thing with the high dive is gravity does most of the work for you. Like you'll get down there. You don't need to. This is not a marathon where you have to get yourself 26 miles. Gravity is going to do most of that work for you. So you have that going for you, which is nice. But lots of hostility in the comments. When we start having an Ohio State Michigan conversation, it always leads to hostility in the comments. Boys and girls, let's play nicely together. It is the off season. Michigan's spring game is actually coming up pretty soon. They have their spring game on April 1st. I have not seen a format for the spring game yet. Michigan always treats their spring game. They never run it like a traditional spring game. It is not a thing at Michigan the way it is at Ohio State, where they will fill the stadium and have like an actual game. A lot of times it's just sort of like a glorified practice and there's 25,000 people there watching or something like that. I don't know why that hasn't caught on at Michigan, but it may be, just Harbaugh not treating it like a game and not making it a super interesting viewing experience probably plays into that. But their spring game is coming up in just a couple weekends, and the Buckeyes, of course, on April 15th. Do you have what are you most excited to see, Kevin, this spring or even during the spring game?
We're talking about Ohio State's real spring game, not Michigan.
Yes, Ohio State's real spring game. Yes.
Yeah. With the amount of injuries, you're going to have a lot of guys that are out. We know it's going to probably be thud at best in terms of what we're seeing there. I'd like to see, obviously I'd like to see the quarterbacks. I'd like to see how McCord and Brown look. I'd like to see the young receivers. I'm very excited about the class of 23 receivers, the Tate, Rogers, obviously Brandon Ennis as well. But I mean, the class before, are we going to see any of the 22 guys step up? Because I think Ohio State, by the time the summer enrollees get here, are still over 85. So I think we're still going to see some movement of what's going to happen. That seems to be a room that potentially could have some movement. Because you do have a backlog. You took 4 receivers in 23, 4 receivers in 22. Hell, we're not even talking about Jaden Ballard, who has been in the system for several years at this point. who seems to always be next man up, but his time hasn't really been there yet. So I'm curious with that, probably more than offensive line, because it's so hard to tell what's happening on offensive line depending on how they do. You make two squads? Do you just do offense versus defense? I mean, we really don't know at that point. And, I guess as I steal all the answers away from Tom and leave him with nothing, how do what do we see out of the transfers that come in? What does Vic Cutler look like? What does Jahad Carter look like? What does Davison
Igbinosun?
All right, I got to learn that one. I got my Polynesian names down really quick. This one, for whatever reason, I can't get it through my thick skull. But I want to see what they look like.
Igbinosun's a Jersey kid, so I have to get that one right. So
hey,
doesn't end in a vowel, Kevin. That's not you're wrong stereotypes.
Whatever. You and your pork roll. Shut up.
Yeah, I think you gave some really good answers there. But I mean, I have basically stopped looking at where they are as compared to 85 right now, because just with the way the transfer portal works right now, every program is having 5 to 10 transfers. Some of them are having 20 transfers a year. I mean, there are some that have had even more than that. I think Colorado in and out is basically, I mean, it's just like a line change. It's just like a whole separate recruiting class going in and out at Colorado, I think, this year with the coaching change. But it is, I think you're going to have just sort of, you look at the second and third year guys who are probably expecting to be getting close to the field. If you start getting passed by some of the guys behind you, or it's your third or fourth year and you're still not really getting close to the field, those are guys who are probably, just based on how everything else is going in college football, some of those guys are going to be looking, thinking about the portal one way or the other. So you'll undoubtedly have plenty of changes coming out of the spring. I'm kind of more interested in who, do they bring in anyone else after the spring? Do they bring in another tackle after the spring? Do they bring in another safety after the spring? There is the guy who, Hilleman, who is a safety who signed with Notre Dame and then just got released from his letter of intent. We were talking about Ohio State Michigan battles. That sounds like that could end up as an Ohio State Michigan battle to sign him after he left Notre Dame. I know you've been talking to some folks about him. Is there any indication sort of where that stands, or when there might be a decision on that one?
I mean, he's going to have to make some visits, and I think that once he makes the visits, the second that I'm told that he is on Ohio State's campus for his visit, I think that this goes from leans Michigan to toss-up. And then, I'm not going to take the initial reports that I hear, unless the initial reports are, well, he committed, but it's like, oh, he really liked it. Well, everybody really likes every visit. And that's not entirely true. I do remember a story that I'll tell quickly as we're kind of winding down on the show, of a kid who committed to Kansas State, sight unseen, went and took his visit to Manhattan, Kansas, and decommitted on the visit because he got to see Manhattan, Kansas, and was like, F this place. This is not where I want to be. But outside of that, everybody has a great time on their visit.
Yeah, they're definitely, Terrell Pryor saying Penn State was too country. There are definitely just not matchups of player and location or player and school that work out real well. But yeah, that is something that generally Ohio State, our recruiting guys always say, if Ohio State gets someone on a visit, especially an official visit, they do such a good job with those that generally that is a pretty good indication. It is sort of, number one, the table stakes to get someone to commit, but number two, a pretty good indication that they have a pretty decent chance to get a guy to commit. You don't have too many just absolute, zero result visits to Ohio State. Typically over the years, you'll hear about one every once in a while, but not too often. Kevin, I guess as we're wrapping things up here, we got to talk just little NCAA tournament.
I'm sitting here getting my bets ready as I'm going.
I know you're getting ready to go watch a little basketball this afternoon, but do you have a game or a team or anything that you are particularly intrigued by?
I'm really going to keep an eye on number 13 Furman versus number 4 Virginia. Virginia giving 5.5. I like Furman to cover on that one. I'm not sure I'm going to go money line on that one on Furman. but that's one that I've got a lot of people talking to me about. One that I'm really kind of conflicted on is San Diego State, and I'm looking at my board in College of Charleston. San Diego State is a 5. College of Charleston is a 12. I mean, we know what 12-5 games are and everything else, but I've got a couple of people who are like bet on the Aztecs there, but I'm really kind of back and forth on that one. And then the last one here on day one that I'm looking at is an 8-9 game, Arkansas and Illinois. Arkansas, I've seen it anywhere from a 1.5 to 3-point favorite. I'm being told to give the points on Arkansas. We know what the Big Ten generally does in the tournament.
Yeah, I am short the Big Ten this year. Texas A&M and Penn State. I'm looking at that one. Yeah, I am. I think I picked most Big Ten teams to lose in the first round. You know, Purdue is going to get through, obviously. I think Indiana probably wins a game or two. But yeah, anywhere down the line with the Big Ten, it does not feel like this is a great Big Ten year. This feels like a year where the Big Ten got 8 teams in, 9 teams in, and is going to have like maybe 2 there for the second weekend. So that's I mean, you have seen this ride before if you are a Big Ten basketball fan. I have talked on the show before about my wife being just absolutely annihilating me in brackets every year. I was excited this year because I did my Ken Palm research, and Creighton. I like Creighton. I think Creighton has the possibility of getting to the Sweet 16, maybe even to the Elite 8. And then looked, and what was the upset, the crazy upset that my wife had picked? She had Creighton in the Elite 8. I was like, son of a gun. It's just, I can't. Yeah. So I guess the good news is, assuming she's smarter than me, and as history has shown, she probably is, I guess I can feel good about that.
Well, there you go. Yeah, I've got my little cheat sheet here, and I'm gonna when I get done here, I'm one of the few people in America who still has a printer at home. I'm gonna print these off and circle the ones that I like, and then of course throw a couple dollars on a parlay, try and hit like a 16-legger, and then I'll just hire somebody to do my podcast appearances for me at that point when I hit my 16-legger.
Tony is the parlay king, not you. You gotta. If you want to hit a parlay, ask Tony. Just you gotta tail Tony on those. That is his. I don't know how he does it. It makes, and there are people on the beat who are, more veteran gamblers who just get extremely mad.
The term is degenerate.
Yes. More experienced, shall we say, in the gambling world, who get extremely mad that, no, you're not supposed to be able to do that. It's kind of like, how do you do that? I don't know, just does it. So, all right. Well, while Tony is somewhere winning money, and Kevin is hopefully winning money too, we hope you guys all do well in your pools and your brackets and whatever else you're doing with the tournament this year. And then we'll be back next week. The Buckeyes are back from spring break for football practice. We'll be there on Tuesday to talk to Ryan Day, and then back again on Thursday. And then there's a scrimmage next Saturday. So a very big week of practice at Ohio State for spring ball, and also a big recruiting week as well. Next weekend shaping up to be a big recruiting weekend. We'll have Alex Glaitman on the morning show on the episode that'll come out Friday night. We'll talk a little bit about that, but also about some of the other big recruitments going on that you're going to want a little update on. Some significant players in the state. A couple young players in the state of Ohio, including an Ohio State legacy, who in the class of 2025, who could be getting close to an offer, who just had a visit, and then a couple big names nationally who are supposed to be visiting, in one case twice in the span of a couple weeks, out in California, just a little later on in the spring. So a lot of really interesting recruiting stuff going on as well. So you will want to check out BuckeyeHuddle.com for all of that. We got lots of great team coverage and recruiting coverage and much more, all there at BuckeyeHuddle.com. So thank you guys all for joining us. Thank you, Kevin, for joining me. Thank you for mostly being civil to each other in the comments for the most part. Always fun to have get a chance to
I think my internet is jamming up here in the goodbyes. I don't know why I'm having bad internet, but you guys can still see me and everything else. I will say goodbye here for the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I'm Kevin. That was Tom Orr. We send our best to Tony Gerdeman, who was not able to make it today. Everybody have a wonderful tournament holiday and win those bets. And we'll talk to you very soon.